I'd like to tell you a story, if you don't mind, on coyotes. Bill Steinke, good friend of mine throughout his life, passed away a few years ago, but this was one of his stories. In the 1950s, south of Trenton, they were having trouble with coyotes. A lot of people were still on the farms and making a living off the land. And almost every farm family had hogs and chickens. Well, the old chickens were being caught by coyotes. Specifically, they had one coyote that was really giving them a hard time, and they knew it was just one kind and one type and one coyote because it was reddish. Almost a dark red coyote, which is very unusual. Most of them are that drab gray, burnt grass look, you know, for a coloring. With that in mind, though, that old coyote gave him a real hard time catching a lot of chickens. Now, Bill Steinke was a gunsmith and a shooter. And he said, I shot at that coyote a number of times, but he said, you know, that coyote was running on the dead run at 300-400 yards, and it was zigzagging. He said it was the only coyote he ever saw that did that. He said he was farming one day on the tractor, and he looked over the side hill, and he said, here come the red coyote looking thing, and he said it was on the dead run. He said that he knew it was a red bitch, as he called her, and he said he knew it was her, and she came up to the edge of a hill, and over the ridge then came 4 coyote dogs. They had been turned loose on her to kill her, and any one of them could kill her. Well, all 4 of them dogs, with the lead dog in advance of the others, and that first dog was getting awful close to her, and she just stopped at that fence row at the top of that hill. Just stopped. And Bill Steinke stopped his tractor and grabbed the 6-power binoculars and said, I want to watch this. And he put his binoculars up, and he said that old coyote just stood there as the first coyote dog got up to her and ran full speed at her, and she just jumped on the other side of the fence, that barbed wire fence, 3-strand barbed wire fence. And that dog ran through that and was ripped to pieces and laying on the other side bleeding to death. She jumped back to the other side where the other coon or coyote dogs was coming at her, and they're getting awful close. And she then just started trotting along the fence. And as the coyote dogs got to her, at one by one, she'd just weave in. And as the coyote dog, it was so tunnel visioned at her, they didn't see the barbed wire fence, and they were ripped to pieces. Each one, all 4, were laying there bleeding, some of them bleeding to death. And when it was all said and done, that coyote just trotted off. Kind of proud of herself she was. And Bill Steinke said, he's sitting on top of that tractor with the binoculars, he said he was in sheer shock and awe of what that coyote, the courage that coyote, and the wisdom that coyote had. Well, he said he saw that coyote a few times after that, and then he said one time he was out in the pasture and he saw that she was piled up there and dead, and quite apparently she had died of old age, and that's unusual in the world of the wild animals. But he said he felt sorry enough for her and had enough respect for her. He went to a south-facing slope, dug a hole, and he put her deep enough so the other critters wouldn't bother her, and then he tilted his hat out of respect for a 1 in a million coyote, he said, because he said he'd never seen one like it before or since. And the man lived into his 80s.